The narcissistic person has a well-honed ability to scan a room and figure out who is worth it for them so they can go grab up supply and status, and they make a beeline to them. So let's start by considering, and you could write this down, you could drop it in the chat. Let's talk about what happened to your needs when you were in a narcissistic relationship. Where did they go? What happened to them? And how do you get them met now? The needless person. I wrote these words down after I had done one of the many podcast interviews I've been doing for this book, right? And I wrote the words down, and they wanted to think about them as a concept for somebody to bring to YouTube, right? And then I walked away from my desk. And a few days later, I looked down at the note on my desk, and I was confused. And I thought, what the heck does that, what was I meaning? When I wrote needless person, I was reading it now like needless to say, like a person we don't need. And then I remembered what I really meant. Because people often ask me, what kind of person does well, and I put well in quotes, with a narcissistic person, because obviously nobody really does well, but what kind of person may make it work? And it dawned on me that would be someone with very few needs and very little sense of self. Why would this be a person? Why would a person be like that? Lots of reasons. Severe trauma bonding since childhood, cultural factors that so incentivize just being what other people want of you and not yourself, lack of knowledge or education about these patterns, or being surrounded by other people who are living or have to live this way, right? So let's talk about this needless person, because this is literally what the narcissistic person really wants, though they would never articulate it that way, right? The needless person never articulates any needs, and they always put whatever needs they have second. And they've been indoctrinated into believing that not needing and giving in and taking care of others is virtuous or good, or they've learned that to be needless is the only way to survive. To have no needs and become needless could be a form of trauma response. Become what the other person wants, and then you are safe, connected, and attached. It's horrifying and it's tragic. But don't delude yourself into believing that this phenomenon is something that we'd only see in heavily authoritarian or inequitable cultures where, I don't know, for example, women may not have many rights. Nope. It's happening right near all of us. Think of how many people walk through the world. I see this on the internet and social media and articles and stuff. They'll say they try to view themselves as easy. I don't need anything. I don't make any demands. I'm just cool. I don't need you. I don't need anybody. I can just go with the flow. Folks, that's the modern version of the needless person. I don't need anyone. I can do it all myself, and I could just be cool and go along. Where it has been culturally twisted, though, is that we view this as being someone who's flexible, easygoing, modern, adaptable, basically have no needs, and you're a catch because you're so amenable. And you can easily see how a very strong person who values their own capacity to meet their own needs and go with the flow and never be perceived as needy or demanding, who views being easy breezy as making them more attractive, you can see, and if you don't, you should, can get someone horribly stuck in a narcissistic relationship. Because over time, I promise you at some point you will be criticized for having a need. And the trains in your life with a narcissist will generally run on time if you don't have any needs. But keep in mind that the narcissistic person will never pat you on the back and thank you or congratulate you for being so need-free. The needless person is a sad artifact of history meeting modern times, of sociological chickens coming home to roost, of the sense that the more easygoing you are, the better. A world where we confuse flexibility with having no needs. And let me tell you, the narcissistic people have glommed onto this. And when I see narcissistic relationships work, it is often because one person had to completely surrender, which is not good for the person who surrendered. Really, it is not. The evolution of a person becoming a needless person can begin in childhood, where the message from a narcissistic parent is, have no needs, become what I want, and you will be loved. The child may make needs known at some point, voice their needs, and then they'll be labeled as ungrateful or selfish, or they'll just have their needs ignored. And the child, who's needing to be attached or connected, slowly gives up on their needs and either figures things out themselves or collapses into helplessness. This can follow, these kinds of patterns can follow a person into adulthood, and then you can easily become the needless person. The narcissistic person doesn't necessarily target these so-called needless persons. They don't know initially. But what may happen is that the narcissistic person will take advantage of the needless person. The needless person may put up with the BS games that the narcissistic person plays. They call, they don't call, they text back, wait, then they text back a lot. And then they make you feel foolish if you voice your needs of wanting better communication in the relationship. The needless person may not feel their wants or needs with regard to communication will ever be honored, so they don't try. And the ground game quickly becomes what works for the narcissistic person in the relationship. Over time, the needless person is more likely to get stuck in one of these relationships because the dynamics of the relationship may simply go unquestioned. People who remain needless are at risk. They're at risk for not caring properly for themselves or advocating for themselves at a crucial time, like during a health crisis. We did a workshop in our healing program recently, and the number of people who were sharing that they've developed autoimmune conditions as a result or because of or while they were in narcissistic relationships is staggering. That sort of chronic, unrelenting stress and the absence of any of your needs ever being met. You may think that you're just being easy breezy, but all of that accumulates physiologically and hurts you. And you're at risk for missing out on meaningful opportunities in your life in terms of education, career, family, and just the stuff of life when you are needless. And most pointedly, you may not be able to discover and explore what happens to you when you're needless. The needless person is forever stuck in this subjugated web of service to the narcissistic person or the narcissistic system. But the needless person is still put out there as an ideal, perfect for rhetoric around how all relationships are sacrifice and difficult, that parenting is meant to be a one-way street of giving yourself up for your children for their entire lives, that we're supposed to work all the time without breaks or vacations. Compromise and sacrifice in relationships is not a bad thing per se. It is part of the equation of balance, but it only makes sense if it's being met and supported. That there's a reciprocity and mutuality, and you feel like you're being seen, heard, valued, and being actually allowed to be your true self. Frankly, under those conditions, if you're sacrificing, it doesn't feel like sacrifice. And a healthy partner or family or even a workplace will recognize if someone is not exerting their needs and check in on that and make sure that the person's okay. But if you are in a long-term or have been in a long-term narcissistic relationship, being needless sort of sadly, if you will, worked while it took a toll on you. I have to tell you, I remember as a child thinking that being ideal meant that you simply went along with everyone else. You caused no friction and you were easy and flexible and always enthusiastic about what other people wanted. But I was never taught the other half. That in a healthy relationship, two people or a group of people go along with each other, listen to each other's needs, meet each other halfway or at least part of the way. Needless to say, none of us should be needless. Healing means figuring out what yours are, from the kind of time to space to meaningful activities to needing a snack to the thermostat setting to what temperature you want your water that you drink to be to how you hope to communicate to how you feel safe. Know these things and find spaces where you can express them. When you recognize there's folks in your world who shut you down, grieve that and then learn from that. Grief is not just a process, but it is also a mighty teacher. Sadly, we think that the counterweight to need less is needy, which implies desperate, sad, pathetic, right? The counterweight to needless is actually self-aware and self-compassionate. No human being should ever exist solely in the service of another. All of us have a basic human right to our true selves. The narcissistic people don't want to give you that, so don't go looking for it there. Find your safe spaces, even if initially they are with yourself, and let yourself need and know what you need. It may also make you less vulnerable and more discerning in narcissistic and in other toxic relationships. This is a really lovely proverb. Don't know if any of you have heard it before, but it goes like this. In love, there is always one who kisses and one who offers the cheek. So this proverb, it is a French proverb, and I thought I was very interested in it when I read it. And as you know, like I said, proverbs are kind of 50-50. Some are great narcissism messages, and some are kind of enabling. But like I said, this particular proverb is a French proverb. It is circulated over time, and obviously in its simplest terms, it's the idea that in most relationships, one person in a relationship loves more than the other, or at least feels entitled to the other person in the relationship reaching out and doing more of the work. I mean, I think that this is a dynamic that may even be true in healthy relationships. And for those of you in long-term relationships, you may even reflect on the idea that there were times when there was one person who would offer the cheek, and then at other times in your relationship, there was someone else. So you would notice that there was an equitable, sort of difference in equitability in terms of how the relationship played out. But in the narcissistic relationship, maybe for a minute during the love bombing stage, when they are trying to win you over, maybe then they are reaching in to kiss you more. But once that's over, it will always be them who offers the cheek. And trust me, that the months when they are trying to win you over, the game is what makes that interesting to them. And from that point forward, once the love bombing is over, they will expect you and everyone else to be leaning in to kiss them. Now, everyone always wants to know, do the narcissists really believe their hype? Do they really think they deserve us to be kissing their cheek, their ring, or their ass? Superficially, yes. Narcissistic people don't like rejection or abandonment, and they love control and domination, and they like the idea that someone else has to do the work to reach in and to kiss them. So they offer the cheek, and we keep reaching in to kiss them. Why do we do that? I recently talked to a group of people about that idea of the list that people make for what they might be looking for in a partner, and that idea of somebody sort of ticking all the boxes. That's an idea that may matter more in romantic relationships, but also has relevance to all relationships, work, family, friends. The narcissists often have the cheeks we want to kiss because too many of us make the mistake of viewing qualities like credentials, success, money, achievements, appearance as what's important. We are told that these folks are a catch, whatever that means. In the workplace, it could be a prestigious company or university or hospital or other agency, so we feel we need to lean in to work at that place and kiss the cheek. The problem with this is that there is a power differential from the jump. When you throw trauma bonding into the mix, the internalized messages that too many of us have from childhood that we are not enough is a problem. Then there is that likelihood of the feeling that leaning in to kiss them is as good as it gets for us because no one's going to lean in and kiss us. And to ask for anything more is hubris. For example, the idea that maybe they'd lean in to kiss us, well, that's way too much to ask. So that combination of the people who are almost socialized to believe that they have to lean in and kiss the cheek of unempathic, invalidating, narcissistic parents really does create a world of kissers and kissees. We must break out of the habit of thinking we are lucky to be with the narcissist, or when the narcissist goes away, that we will not find someone else. That's a load of nonsense. After they depart our lives, we may actually find someone healthy, or just be good with being alone for a while and finding our own stride. Narcissistic relationships are about a difference in power, not necessarily the power that comes from strength or money or influence, but the power that comes from not playing on an even playing field and getting to be on the higher part of that playing field. Narcissistic people are willing to manipulate and take advantage and gaslight in a relationship to get their way and maintain their reality. And we are just thinking that they are on the same page with us and that they have the same definition of love. They simply don't. One of the worst legacies of growing up in a narcissistic household is to end up with the idea that you're lucky that someone wants to be your friend or your partner or hire you or work with you. I got to be fully honest, as a survivor, that's actually one of my core wounds. And I'm still surprised when somebody actually wants to be friends with me or hang out with me. So that legacy means you are more likely to lean in and do all the kissing and do all of the work. Breaking out of those thought patterns becomes critical to get out of the cycle that you believe someone is doing you a favor by loving you. It's difficult for survivors of narcissistic abuse to lean back and recognize that sometimes they are worthy of having someone lean in and kiss them, and that healthy relationships involve some being kissed and some reaching out and doing the kissing. The imbalance in mutuality is a hallmark of a narcissistic relationship because narcissistic folks use relationships as a way to get their own needs met exclusively with little regard for yours. So it's a lot of them sticking their cheek out and waiting for the kiss. You are worthy of being the one being reached in for, whose cheek is to be kissed, not just during the love bombing period, but far beyond that. If you feel you have to lean in because that was your family role, or you were told or experienced that you were not enough, or that you're so lucky to be in this relationship, be careful. Now, you don't need to start counting kisses, but ask yourself, how much of the heavy lifting are you doing in this relationship? If it's a narcissistic relationship, then I'm guessing you're doing most of it. The cool girl is a girl who's too cool for expectations in the relationship. The cool girl is okay with putting up with stuff that makes her uncomfortable because talking about being uncomfortable, that's not cool. Cool girls don't have issues. Cool girls don't have needs. Cool girls are independent and they can take care of all that themselves. Cool girls or cool people have remarkable restraint. They can hold themselves back from texting back for weeks, or sending a text, wondering where a person went because it wouldn't be cool. But in the meantime, they're obsessing about why the other person isn't getting back to them. So a lot of time and mental bandwidth can get wasted in the process of being a so-called cool girl. You want to know who loves cool girls? Narcissistic people, regardless of their gender. This whole idea of the cool girl cool person, just be cool, call it whatever the hell you want thing, has been burbling up for a long time. It's interesting. The concept of sort of the cool girl was at first codified in 1995 with books like The Rules, where the rules were be cool, don't call them. Nowadays it's don't text them. Just be an inert, cool girl object with no needs. And then maybe they will chase me and want me because I'm so enticing and I'm cool and I'm not just giving in. This stuff is narcissism chum on the water, because game playing in relationships is the narcissistic person's bread and butter. They want games. They want the thrill of the hunt. They want the pursuit. And above all, they want the win. I think that the challenges around this whole cool girl thing is that people view that the opposite of the cool girl is somebody who's needy, demanding, and neurotic. That the person who is not cool is showing their hand and giving away all their power. That by showing your interest in someone, it's over. They won't be interested in you. There's a middle ground here, and I'll get to that in a moment. But the challenge is that this idea of dating and relationship rules, the whole idea of the cool girl, keep it cool paradigms, literally cement the dynamics of a narcissistic relationship before you can say love bomb. At the core of the cool girl paradigm is the idea that the person, the girl, can just go along and be easy and not at all be demanding. You don't want to communicate with me? That's cool. Yeah, I got a life. You might find yourself doing, thinking, and saying things like, you want to have dinner with your ex on your own? Yeah, that's cool. I'm an open person. You want to go out for drinks with that person who posts lots of thirst trap pictures and is texting and DMing you late at night? Yeah, that's cool. I'm not even going to ask you if this person doesn't know that I'm your partner because I'm cool. And that's what a cool girl does, right? We don't ask because it's cool to not ask. Oh, you don't post pictures of me on your social media? That's cool. It's okay that other people don't know that we are together, even though you tell me that this is a committed relationship. But I'm cool. It's cool. Social media is fake. It doesn't matter to me that people think that you're single because I'm cool. That's how this whole cool girl thing works. Like I said, it's narcissism chum. So the assumption is that being cool in a way means power, right? It's this sort of false indifference. And let's face it, in a way, indifference is power. It's akin to the idea that the best negotiation tool is the willingness to walk away from the table. But it's also walking right into the narcissistic person's trap. To be cool really means that you don't voice needs, you don't voice wants, or concerns, or discomforts. It means that you may ignore your own physical somatic responses because you want to seem cool, as though cool people would never have trauma responses. So you don't bring anything up. And the narcissistic person certainly is not going to have empathy for you and think, ooh, maybe me going out with the thirst trap to talk about work will make my partner uncomfortable. No, no, no. They will never think that. Their entitlement and their lack of empathy means that they aren't even thinking about you. But my cool friend, if the tables were turned, if you were to go have drinks with that attractive person who is helping you with the work thing, oh my, oh my, oh my, the hypocritical hell you would have to pay. You would be called every name in the book, branded everything you could imagine, and they'd probably end the relationship with you. So let's say you get to the point where you can't keep doing cool anymore. You just can't do it. You can't sit back and let the attractive people posting on their social media, you can't let it go. You can't let the late night shady texts that they're getting go. You can't keep letting them get away with the drinks with the attractive person or the dinner out with someone that makes you uncomfortable. And you finally bring it up. Cool girl leaves the house. And in fact, your reaction may be stronger than you want because that doesn't feel cool, right? Because you've bottled it up for so long. Well, you know what happens then? Then they gaslight you and tell you that you are out of your mind and crazy. And then they say, what, you're just bringing this up now for the first time? What's your problem? Those of you who've been in these relationships have been to this rodeo before, and you know how this goes. Because by definition, a narcissistic relationship is a place where you cannot be you. You cannot express wants, needs, disagreements, discomfort. So the whole cool person trope plays into that model perfectly. You think you're being cool, you're keeping it cool, and that it's attractive. The dynamic that they want is just being met by you being cool. You have no demands or wants that are being voiced. So everything moves at their pace. It's narcissist heaven. But unfortunately, that's never going to translate into a good relationship. Instead, it will translate into something where you will be taken for granted even more quickly than someone in a narcissistic relationship, if that was even possible. Here's the facts, folks. We as human beings have psychological histories. Things happen to us. Trauma, neglect, adversity, abandonment, betrayal, infidelity, abuse, and just life. And all of it affects us. How we think, how we relate. It affects our nervous system. These histories can undercut our sense of trust and our sense of safety depending on what's happened to us. So there are people out there for whom their partner going out to dinner with a flirty colleague or social media lurker or an ex, it doesn't bother them. It's not that they're cooler or healthier necessarily. That's just not their wound. That's not their story. It's not their trigger. Maybe theirs is different. There are people out there, especially those with a history of other narcissistic relationships, who have been cheated on repeatedly or lied to or betrayed in other ways. And so relationships for people with those histories already feel like risky places. And we carry that fear and betrayal in our bodies. We may literally feel a tightness in our chest, a heaviness in our gut, or even on our head when we believe our partner is out with someone attractive without us. And when they come home, you want to be cool, girl. We want to be cool. So in a voice that is much higher than our usual pitch, we say, oh, hey, did you have a good time? I hope so. But that's not us. That's the cool person in us. That's not authentic. And we attempt to silence our true selves, our anxieties. We don't share those vulnerabilities. And acting cool, like it doesn't bother us, it doesn't mean that it all goes away. Instead, what happens is that we slowly start to get sick. Each time we have to play at being the cool person, we may get anxious, hypervigilant, distracted, angry, can't sleep. We might get physically sick. But at least we're cool, right? Remember, the narcissistic person needs supply. Lots and lots of supply. And they can only get it from other people. That's why they are so often shady, why they need flirty comments and likes and DMs. They need them. It's like food for them. And if you've been hurt by this behavior in the past, it doesn't feel okay. In a healthy, normal, growth-oriented, safe, respectful, compassionate relationship, we can share our wounds, our fears, our worries, and the other person protects us. In a healthy relationship, each partner is a custodian of the vulnerabilities of the other person. It's not about being cool. It's about being real. It may be that someone not responding to your text or a one-word answer over and over again doesn't work for you. Well, a cool girl would never dream of saying anything. But a healthy person might say, you know what, this doesn't work for me. And they recognize that the other person may not have more in them than one word and delayed responses. It's good to learn this stuff early so you can cut your losses. Because in between these two extremes, between the extreme of the having to be the cool girl and then the chronically needing to be the reassured, neurotic, needy person, is the person who can express their needs and wants, who behaves in a way that is in line with their true selves and vulnerabilities. Let's say you're thinking about someone you're dating, or you read something you think they'll like. You send it to them. You don't say, ooh, it's too soon. If sending a text too soon is what leads them to withdraw or become cold and distant, that's what leads them to do that, well, then that's their own strange attachment journey, and that's probably not going to work for you. Cut your losses. For a narcissistic person, the game, the chase, the hunt, the intense attention, and then withholding from you. That's how they play the game, because that works for them. I mean, speaking about attachment styles, most narcissistic people have anxious and avoidant attachment styles, one, the other, or often a mix of the two. So much of the relationship advice out there, and there's a lot of it, is about tactic rather than being about being yourself. This is even more pronounced in the era of online dating. And this really matters if you have had a history of narcissistic relationships, since these relationships steal most of our ability to be ourselves because we were shamed for being ourselves. So any guidance that tells you to be cool, or you think that it will work, it can set a precedent early on of not expressing yourself and then getting caught in this tyrannical system of a narcissistic relationship where you always feel silenced or gaslighted. I say this as someone who sort of internalized the cool girl within my trauma-bonded, narcissistically abused interior, that if I was ever going to get anyone to notice me, I had to go with the flow, or I was definitely going to be rejected. So the stuff I endured in relationships has been atrocious. And I still carry tremendous shame about the relational stuff I put up with in the name of being the cool girl. Easy, breezy, I don't care, I'm open, I'm not needy. I was never needy, but I did have vulnerabilities. And if someone couldn't cherish me and safeguard those and meet me where I was at, then they weren't my person. But it took me nearly 60 years and a lot of narcissistic BS, and not just in intimate relationships, but in friendships and the workplace and family, to figure that out. I don't want that for you. I don't want this to take you 60 years. So please listen and get there quicker than 60. If telling someone within reasonable limits that you're uncomfortable, like listen, it's not going to fly to tell someone that you're uncomfortable, that they're getting up in the morning and going to work. But it's absolutely understandable that you would be uncomfortable if for the third night this week, they are having dinner with that one colleague after work. And this is one of my favorites, when people say, my work is on social media, so the people making those sexy comments is just the job. Actually, not. And it's okay for you to say, it doesn't feel good to me. Again, it just may not be your person. But if telling someone that you're uncomfortable makes you not cool, or makes it that they call you demanding or needy or neurotic or too much, which is gaslighting, remember, it's not you. You're simply sharing a vulnerability. It's actually on them if they can't hear it or if they make it about them. To every person out there who is staring at their phone and wondering, I wish I could text them, but then I wouldn't be cool. Or I really want to tell them that this thing they're doing, I'm not comfortable with it, but then I wouldn't be cool. Please know that this isn't about coolness. It's about a paradigm that relationships work if you don't have any needs. But FYI, that's not a relationship. That's servitude. And I am no longer cool. I'm not sure that I ever was. I'm just a big old human backpack full of vulnerabilities and wounds. And I'm tired of playing at life as though I'm not. Because honestly, the opposite of cool is actually warm. And that is the loveliest thing a person can be. Stop playing it cool. So, saying that, the social climbing narcissist, to me, feels like a redundancy. All narcissistic people are social climbers. By definition, social status is a major motivator for them because it's conflated with all of that power, control, and domination stuff. But let's break down the different ways it can look, because it can really cast a light on a very common theme in narcissistic relationships. Every narcissistic person, without exception, uses a relationship as some means to an end. It's not about the affiliation, the connection, or the love. It's about a means to an end. And that end is usually supply and social status. Status is a form of supply. Narcissistic folks are also chameleons who will tell stories and misrepresent themselves to get a seat at the table of people who have more social heft than them, more hip cred. In fact, if you are a fancy, shiny person, you have money or fame or high status or a fancy family, you are narcissism crack. You are what they want. And folks like you may be disproportionately preyed upon, interestingly, by narcissistic folks. In an intimate relationship, first of all, they may be social climbing. They may be using you as a tool of social climbing, right? It doesn't feel good to recognize that. But if, like I said, if you have money, resources, credentials, a family with influence or power or some notoriety or resources, whatever it is, if you represent a step up for a narcissistic person in terms of status, it could even be your appearance, then you may meet a narcissistic person and face one hell of a love bomb. The narcissistic person may do their homework ahead of time about you. We can do that quite easily now. Learn about you, what you're about, your place in the world. And yes, your social status will matter greatly in their pursuit of you. And while it doesn't feel good, remember, they aren't getting to know anyone they are in a relationship with, social status or no. Your social status is the quality they want to pursue. So it's not a you thing, it's how they pick people. This really plays out if the narcissistic person may not have a lot going for them, but they're very attractive, or they have some kind of hip cred, or they're just a really good liar and can sell a pretty fancy, compelling story about themselves. That's really not entirely true. Or you may just be a nice person who saw something that you liked about them because they're so good at selling a story, and then you get into a relationship with them. They are so manipulative that they may even play on how they really just wanted to get to know you as a person, and they see deeper than the superficial status stuff that other people must be trying to take advantage of. When a narcissistic person gets into a relationship with someone who will improve or lift their social status, your narcissistic supply becomes rocket fuel because it carries with it so much other stuff that they get for the price of just one relationship. But after a while, your relationship will go south in a terrible way. It always does, right? Because when the narcissistic person gets into a relationship with someone that they're using to social climb or to get an improvement in social status or even financial status, the narcissistic person is also, they're so insecure and they're constantly kind of on edge. So their shame is always right at the surface, right? Their rejection sensitivity, their hypersensitivity all around, it's right there. They overperceive every slight, every critique. They know at some level they're punching above their weight class, and they want to climb up in the ranks, and they want to be seen as the one with social status independent of you. In these types of social status climbing relationships, the narcissistic person may be in a rush to get a ring on it or get married, as that would imply a more concrete connection in a relationship, and that through marriage they would then have the status themselves. They will very quickly take on all the characteristics and identity of the status they are climbing to, spending money that they may not have, going into debt, or spending your money to get cars or clothes. They might start dressing in a certain way, just doing things associated with that higher social status. And this may not happen only within an intimate relationship. Narcissistic people are social climbers, plain and simple. They may seek out fancy friends. They may even endure humiliating treatment by those higher status friends just to be close to the action. They may try to social climb through their jobs, hang out at places, I guess the types of places where wealthy people congregate. That might be certain kinds of restaurants, clubs, resorts, private clubs. And they may attempt to get these expensive memberships to these private clubs repeatedly, anything to put them in proximity to lots of people with higher social status. They will talk about famous people they met one time, or rich people, or high status people as though they are friends or business contacts. They will be assertive and even aggressive in courting business and social contacts. For example, their kid may go to school with the kid of a person they want to meet or do business with, and they'll try to use their own poor kid as a playdate pawn to get closer to the fancy parent. Trust you me, I grew up in LA and I saw that dance happen many, many times here. Within families, you may have also witnessed this. A narcissistic parent, for example, wanting higher social status, perhaps even being dismissive of your other parent who wasn't making that life happen for them, right? Couldn't keep up with the Joneses, the proverbial Joneses, or desperate to belong to whatever social groups existing, whatever those social groups were when you were a kid growing up, so they could move socially up. They may have been the parent. You might have had a parent that urged you to play with children whose families represented higher status in your community, even if you didn't like those children. Obviously, at work and in employment situations, this is a thing. And especially if your job is coalesced around sales and high-end, fancy kinds of clients. Because you need to get those folks near you, and the social climbing of being near fancy people so you can sell them stuff is a part of that. But the social climbing is not always a means to an end. It's not just to get the fancy lifestyle or close a sale. For a narcissistic person, it is the end. In the DSM, one of the diagnostic criteria for narcissistic personality disorder is, quote, believes that he or she is special and unique and can only be understood by or should associate with other special or high status people or institutions. So social climbing in and of itself is the thing. And it reflects the grandiosity and entitlement and covetousness and power obsessive focus of all narcissistic personality styles. Their social climbingness can also explain the devaluation and the discard, especially if you were not the high-status partner that helped them climb the ladder. They may have met you, and then, because they do tend to have a roving eye, they may, in the course of your relationship or marriage, meet or observe someone who has greater social status. And whether or not they leave you for them, they may do things like compare you to them, compare your lifestyle to theirs. And yes, at least in the status department, you're always going to come up short. The narcissistic person will be chronically dissatisfied in their life with you if they have this idea that there is somehow more out there and you aren't bringing it. Love, compassion, respect, that's not enough. The same thing can happen in family systems, where the narcissistic person may want to distance themselves from a family that may not have the high status they want. And this can be particularly pronounced if the narcissistic person managed to make it or succeed, really leapfrog away in terms, especially financially, from their family of origin. And they may want to distance themselves from the humble beginnings or a family that isn't so hip or sophisticated and are just regular folks. The social climbing narcissistic person may even, in some cases, try to make over their family, perhaps getting them into new clothes or cars or the like. Not always. Typically, they'll just distance from them, even if that family and their support was what got that narcissistic person to that place. Their lack of empathy means they don't care. If the narcissistic person in a relationship with you manages to score a new high-status person, yes, there is a good chance that they will leave you for them. Always remember, for narcissistic people, relationships are superficial and exist for their regulation and for their needs. So someone coming in with the mother lode of the ultimate supply is very enticing and impossible for them to turn down. I cannot tell you, in the years I've been doing this in practice, how many times I've seen this happen. Because the narcissistic person is like a damned fishing trawler, they have hundreds of lines in the water, always looking around to see who the biggest fish in the room is. So when that person who can climb them up the ladder does start to bite, and they can sort of snivel their way into there, they will. And it feels awful if this happens to you. When this happens, and keep in mind, social status may be more than just money or family status or something. It may just be that they want the status of someone younger and the social climb that comes from spinning around town with their shiny new thing. If this happens to you when you are left for the social climb trade out, it's an awful feeling. And many people will say this particular dynamic multiplied this grief, and it takes a minute and feels deeply unjust, especially as you witness the narcissistic person roll into a new life, which of course they have to broadcast on Instagram, because really, for a narcissistic person, what's the point of social status if you can't make people envy you, which is another diagnostic criterion for narcissistic personality disorder, by the way. Narcissistic friends will do this too. They may blow you off, claim to be sick, and then you see the Instagram post of them at some high status event with other people. Narcissistic people don't always have the best frontal lobes, so they just have to post, even though they know you might see it after they lied to you. And they also lack empathy, so they wouldn't ever stop to think about how it would affect you, and they just assume you'll come back around. Because friendships aren't monogamous, narcissistic friends can pursue their social climbing in a different way and may claim they have to do it for their career, for networking, or whatever. But if the social climbing ladder friends engage with them, you will always be the B list, the backup plan, if the high status new friends aren't available. So what does that mean for us? You gotta always remember that any relationship with a narcissistic person was never and could never be deep. This confirms it. And I promise you this, they may come sniffing around and hoovering again if the rungs of the social climbing ladder break and they come crashing back down. Social climbing and social status are the same in terms of function as entitlement and grandiosity and arrogance and charm and charisma and all of the narcissistic defenses that protect a narcissistic person from internal insecurity and shame. And with the social climbing comes the contempt and snobbiness and a sort of looking down at you if they perceive you as someone who really can't help with their social status. The narcissistic person has a well-honed ability to scan a room and figure out who is worth it for them so they can go grab up supply and status, and they make a beeline to them. They are also masterful at talking to a person and pretty quickly figuring out if that person they're talking to can do anything for them, and if they can't, again, quite quickly move on to their next target. But if you are on the receiving end of this kind of discard, it hurts. And as much as I say, it's not you, it's them, it doesn't take away the sting of feeling that you weren't enough. But enough what? For the narcissistic person, it may be about whether the new person's family has money, or they can go on some fancy-ass vacation, or they have social standing, or they have connections, or a beach house, or can make them help them make something happen, like finance their business. Or are simply young, the new partner's simply young, and they can seem more virile or interesting by having a disproportionately young and attractive partner on their arm. These are superficial indicators, but it hurts nonetheless. And my holiday prayer for each and every one of you that has been through this kind of experience is that you get to see their social climbing experiment fall apart. May we all get to witness that. I gotta say, I got that once when a particularly mean lady who had clearly social climbed, as the story I was told goes. I didn't know, but that's what I was told about her. And who, because I was sort of the kind of dumpy, overweight mom, kind of looked at me like sort of smelly laundry and wouldn't give me the time of day when she first met me. In fact, I think she probably thought I was one of the servers at the event that I first met her at and not an attendee. Many, many years later, she reached out wanting help when her narcissistic husband, big surprise, left her for the much younger replacement set. She reached out wanting therapy. She said, "Oh, I remember you knew me way back when." I had already closed up my practice by then, so I was able to politely demur and say, "I'm sorry, I don't take new clients." I have empathy, so I did feel bad for her. I felt schadenfreude, of course, but I felt bad for her. But she was a cautionary tale of the dangers of social climbing. Get too high, and the thud when you land is a lot more painful. And I had enough pride to say, yeah, no, thanks. Always remember how the mighty fall. And there's a lot more oxygen here down at sea level anyhow. Let those narcissistic people keep reaching for their castles in the sky. It gets them out of our lives and frees us up for healthier and more authentic relationships with healthier and more authentic people who like to keep their feet firmly planted on the ground. And speaking of the It's Not You, really, it's a book. It's Not You. Please check it out. Link is in the notes. Check it out, and hopefully you want to pre-order it. Thanks again.